Good evening. Welcome everybody. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us, those of you who can be here in these trying COVID times, for your presence. It's always an honor to be around readers. Writers like us, the greatest prize you can give us is someone to just read and enjoy our stories. So thank you for making it over here. And for those of you at home, thanks for taking time out of your busy streaming schedules to stream live with us. It's really a pleasure to be here with Mr. Femi Kayode, the author of this wonderful book called Lightseekers, which is what we're going to be talking about today. For those who do not know, Femi Kayode is trained as a psychologist in Nigeria before starting a career in advertising. He has created and written several primetime TV shows. He recently graduated with a distinction from the University of East Anglia's Creative Writing Program, winning the UEA Little Brown Award for Lightseekers when he was still writing it, and is currently a PhD candidate at Bath Spa University. The second book in the Philip Taiwo series will be published in 2023, and as we all know, he's here in Windhoek with us, where he lives with his wife and two sons. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. That sounds like a stranger.
No, it is actually not a stranger. It is a living and breathing author working in Windhoek, living in Namibia, publishing and writing wonderful stories from here. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you again for the book den for making this possible, and for Jonathan Publishers for getting us copies of his wonderful book as well. It is important to mention at this stage that during this conversation, I will ask a mysterious question, and a lucky reader live streaming today or watching can answer this question with a signed copy from Femi. So we're going to get all of these books. He's going to sign only one of them, and then we're going to give them away, and then the rest you must just come and buy and hope that he's no, I'm joking. I'm joking. But Femi, really, it's wonderful for us to be in conversation. I have to ask first, with regards to Lightseekers, what is it about crime, the violent act of it, that makes writing pleasurable, about writing about crime, but most importantly, reading about crime? Because crime fiction is wildly popular.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. First of all, I don't think all crimes are violent.
Okay.
You know, so there are different types of crime. I personally believe that at the heart of most great literature is a crime. You know, sometimes crimes of the heart. You know, sometimes self-betrayal. You know, is a crime, and you know, any kind of anti-social behavior to a large extent, based on the social norms at that particular point in time, I consider a crime. So crime fiction itself is very exciting for me, because I think, especially for me being an African, I feel that crime affects everyone. Crime is almost like writing about a cookery book, you know, because everybody eats. And crime affects everyone, whatever your race, whatever your gender, you know, whatever your class, you know, crime affects everyone. And I think that universal sense of the impact of crime on humanity makes it very popular, because it affects everyone. So for me, crime gives me the opportunity, or crime fiction gives me the opportunity to transverse the society, you know, and look at the different stratas in the society and how it affects the society and how it affects the people that committed the crime or the people that are affected by the crime. So I think that's the fascination for crime where that's concerned. And I don't think there's any human condition that gets us all riled up as much as injustice.
Yeah.
You know, injustice always, like, at least the way we perceive it, gets us all passionate, and you can see the extremities of human behavior when there's a sense that something has gone wrong, injustice, and the whole purpose of crime fiction is actually to restore the balance, you know, and I think that's the payoff that everybody's looking for at the end of the day.
As you can see, everybody, Femi is a very smart person, so I'm going to need some of you people on live streaming who are watching this live to send us questions that I can actually sound smart when I ask them. So you can do that by sending your questions, dropping them in the Facebook comment, or send your questions on Telegram to the book den at 081-201-3279. But getting back to your thing about crime getting people riled up, what is it specifically that gets you riled up as a writer? Because writing about it cannot be easy, and you need some form of energy to get yourself worked up to write about this.
Injustice.
Injustice.
I think it's just injustice. It's just that sense that something has gone wrong and it has to be fixed. And for me also, being in several environments over time, I've come to terms with the fact that there seems to be a general, almost like knowledge, the spirit or the energy of humanity knows that when something goes wrong, even if it's not in the constitution or whatever, there's something that's gone wrong and shifted in the in the system, and so for me that really gets me going, injustice. And then secondly, which is my pet peeve, is that human beings commit crimes, and that's fine, but I'm more fascinated by what it is in the system that makes that crime possible. So a lot of people have read Lightseekers and they say, oh, this can never happen in the US. Yes, it can never happen in the US. The crime can happen in the US, but the process of solving it is very much dependent on the culture, on the law, on the systems, on the legal system, on the policing system, and so many things. So my major academic interest is the impact of systems on crime.
And is that, for example, the reason why you chose a clinical psychologist as the main protagonist of the story as opposed to a detective?
Yes, to a very large extent, yes. And he's an investigative psychologist.
Investigative psychologist.
No, it's very interesting because a lot of people, I've read a lot of that, and people say he's a forensic psychologist or he's an investigative psychologist. But the reality of the matter is that there's a difference. So I want to take this opportunity to explain the difference.
Yeah.
So an investigative psychologist is a very interesting and very new field. He is somebody, or she is somebody, who basically looks at the process of investigation and ascertains whether a crime has been committed or not. So if you arrest somebody, for instance, and you say we're arresting somebody for murder, and then you bring in an investigative psychologist, he looks at your process as to how you arrested. He looks at the evidence that you put in place, and basically is able to ascertain that truly a crime has been committed. So an investigative psychologist is really somebody that you want on both sides. It's some kind of like that expert witness that you have that's able to say, because this happened and because this happened, because of this and this and this, looking at the paper trail, looking at the investigative process.
Yeah.
So I think the best way to define an investigative psychologist is that he's an auditor of the procedure. He audits the procedure of investigating a crime, and that's what makes him, for me, a very special person. He's not your typical forensic psychologist. He's somebody that just looks at he looks at the intention of the police.
Yeah.
What's your unconscious bias, for instance, when you're investigating this crime? Do you already assume that this person is guilty in the way you have interviewed or you've interrogated it? So that's what makes him a very special person. So why did I choose him? Because he's a thinker, and because his core responsibility, his mandate is to find out why.
Yeah.
And why of human behavior always fascinates me.
Yeah.
Because your why is very different from my why. And I think that sometimes when we understand why people do what they do, we tend to have a bit more compassion, a bit more understanding, and I think understanding why can actually bring people together a lot more than what you can see, the surface, the act itself, the what and the when, and all of those kind of things. Yeah.
But doesn't that also, in choosing this Philip Taiwo as investigative psychologist, I saw it play out in Lightseekers that you're not only investigating the police or auditing the police, but you're also still diving to the root cause of the problem. And for those who have not yet read this book, I'll set the scene for you. 3 boys are brutally murdered, mob justice style, in a Nigerian town. Over the course of a year, the crime is solved. The paperwork is finished, and a year later, a character approaches Philip Taiwo, Dr. Taiwo, and asks him to go back and look at the paper trail, reinvestigate the scene to find out why these boys were murdered. That is the central mystery in it. It is a very violent crime that is common for those of us who live in diaspora who know about mob justice. And one of the things I want to ask you, if you choose this auditor, aren't you taking on too much as a writer investigating all of these multiple layers that are moving, because there's not only the mystery of why these boys are moving, but then there's also like the cover-up trail. So you're solving more than one thing at the same time.
Yes, and I look back now and I realize how extremely stupid and brave I was. But I think my ethos when it comes to writing crime fiction is something that a professor of mine once told me, and that is, why do you write? And I love it so much. I write to know what happened.
Yeah.
And that is a very, it just always gets me going, because to be honest, when I started the book, all I knew was I just want to know what happened. I didn't have an idea of how it was going to be resolved. I didn't have an idea of who was who. I just knew that I needed to understand this crime that was inspired by a real life situation or a real life event that happened in my home country, Nigeria. And of course, when I started writing, I mean, there are times when I'll walk away and I'll be like, what have you started? You know, but you have to finish it, right? And I think if I was not studying, if it wasn't part of my thesis, I think I would have given up, to be honest, because I just got a bit too much at a point. But again, just finishing it made me understand that's what happened. That's my explanation for what happened. So yes, it was a bit too much, and I get that feedback a lot. It's like, oh no, Lightseekers has so much inside it and all that kind of thing. But that's also for me the measure of the complexity of the human condition. You know that. You know, you can't, in 2021, you can't write simple stories. You know, it's like, you know, everybody has gotten so complex and everything plays on each other, you know. So the whole, you can't even write those nice, cozy Agatha Christie, you know, because, you know, we have Google, we have Telegram, we have WhatsApp, we have, you know, the ways of covering up a crime in 1920 is not the same way we cover a crime nowadays. So it's a very complex thing, but I'm very happy that I did it because I learned a lot in the process.
What you mentioned about complexity, about everything layered, and you mentioned Agatha Christie, and I was just thinking right now, you know, how everything, stories these days can no longer be just simple. So when you hear about something like Murder on the Orient Express, you know, in today's world, you'd be like, what about the people who are murdered to create the rail track for the Orient Express? Like, that's a deeper story. But what you're talking about, the complexity and the layering of stories, is something that comes through in Lightseekers. I found myself reading this late at night, and there were chapters where your ruminations on marriage, although passive, I would read, and then my wife would walk into the room, and then she'd catch me looking at her because I'm reading something. And even though it is a mystery in which a crime needs to be solved, or the process of solving that crime is investigated, there are these little moments in which humanity happens. Taiwo faces human problems within his marriage, his relation to his family, with his kids, and also just everyone around him. In writing about crime, why was it important to bring that human aspect about it? Like your ruminations on marriage, I haven't been married as long as this guy, but I was like, oh gosh, I'm 2 years into this, and I was like, this is gonna be a long road.
No, I tell you, first of all, it was very important for me to have a hero that was not a superhero. I needed him to be...
Is he a hero?
Well, a protagonist that is not, that is not, I wanted the story to be driven by somebody as accessible as you and I, number one. Number two is that I also felt that it was important that he had what you call normal problems, you know, because when you really think about it, his issues are really quite normal,
middle class,
very middle class and very pedestrian and all of those kind of things. But I had lost faith, or I think the kind of story I wanted to tell was not the story where some extremely intelligent Hercule Poirot comes in and just figures it out and puts all of that. I really needed the audience to almost be inside his brain, and the technique that I really wanted to do was that I wanted the audience to become him. And so that's why I think I wrote it in the present tense, so that it's like you as the reader, you're the camera, you're in the camera, and you're actually following him. And some people would say, I figured it out before he did. Like, that's normal, that's okay. He doesn't have to figure everything out before you did, so that you can respect him. I wanted you to respect him for his humanity, and for the fact that he's a hard worker. He works very hard, and he thinks very hard, and he applies himself, because that is the skill that allows him to be able to analyze situation. And that analysis is so important for you to get into a new culture, to understand what is happening in that culture and all that. So it was actually a trick in a sense, because if I got a Superman, super intelligent, Watson kind of person, I don't think that the audience will be able to have those insights into the Nigerian society as they did.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. For those of you who are joining us, we're at the Book Den, and I'm talking to Femi Kayode. If the audio quality is a bit dubious at this moment in time, do not worry. This video session is being recorded as well and will be uploaded to the Facebook page for your viewing pleasure later. Femi, I have to ask, you said that you didn't want to create a Superman character or the super intelligent detective and whatnot. For me personally, I didn't think Dr. Taiwo was a superhero, and whenever they have like the main character, I'm always interested in like their sidekicks. Chica was good for me. So for me personally, I like a lot of films in which there's like a protagonist, like Frodo in Lord of the Rings, but the people interested me more are Samwise. Why was it important to have Chica? Because he does more, in my opinion, to save this man in a lot of situations. He's very intuitive, solves problems even before they've arrived. And basically shepherds this dude to the finish line. So why not focus on Chica?
Well, because for me, Chica is Nigeria. It's just how it is.
It's just how it is.
Yes, Chica is the inventiveness and the imagination and the resilience of people that are very much misunderstood. And he was the humbling part. He humbled Philip, because Philip needed to be humbled. He spent so long in the US. He was very judgmental. He was looking at everybody around him like, a bit, I wouldn't say beneath, but like, oh, I know more, I've lived in the US, and I really am a reluctant returnee kind of thing. And what I wanted Chica to be is to say, no, we are actually strong, we're actually self-sufficient, we could have, and so Philip needed to, Chica was introduced or is being presented as the humbling part, because every time Philip sees Chica, he realizes that these are strong people. These are resilient people. These are very, very inventive people, and strong, physically strong, and just as intelligent. So Chica was a very fun character to write for me, because is the Nigeria that I envision in my head, that my ideal Nigeria, in terms of the strength, the intelligence, the imagination, and all of those kind of things. And it needed to be contrasted against Chica, who thought, I have it all, but yet you can't even save yourself through a checkpoint.
I mean, those little nuances of human behavior, like when you land at this airport, there's a particular way to get through. There's a particular way you must portray yourself. I mean, a lot of Namibians living here will also understand there's a particular way you deal with the police or someone in authority. So there's these wonderful little things where even from here you can be like, yeah, I can see why Philip would have been in deep trouble if he had said this at this time.
Exactly.
We also have those mannerisms like, yes boss, no boss, chief, come on, let's talk about this. We also have those mannerisms. And it was wonderful that they came in and that it was, Chica who navigated them. But you said that, Chica represents the Nigeria to you, or in your head. But if he represents that, doesn't he then also represent the difficulty of solving the mystery of the Okriki 3? If he is all of those things, intelligent, self-sufficient, whatever, then why was there a need for Philip to come in? Because that's also was a mystery that I encountered, like, just let Chika solve this thing. But then why did he have to come?
But Chika was also very clear about the fact that he didn't have something that Philip had.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that was what I was trying to bring out, is that this crime, which was based on a real crime that happened, nobody asked why. You know, everybody wanted to solve the crime, right? Everybody could see who did it. And everybody wanted the case over and done with. And I think that is the downfall of a lot of our societies. You know, that almost like we don't do lessons learned, we don't do case studies, you know. And that is what I would say, you know, the Americans or the Europeans have over a lot of African cultures, because we sort of don't go back and write a proper report, you know, and say, okay, this happened, this happened, this happened. That's the fact. Everybody knows that. But based on further investigation, we need to take a step backwards to say, how did we get to where we are now? And how can we make sure it doesn't happen again? And those are the key parts of a case study. You know, you look at, this is the research topic, you know, this is the abstract, you know, this is the encapsulation of what it is, and then you go into the study and you write it. And I think that's sort of what is missing. And what Philip brought to the case was the fact that he asked the questions that nobody was asking. Because that's the culture. We don't ask why. We look at the what, we look at the how, and we deal with it. Yes. And to be honest, then you look at most constitutions and look at most legal precedents. We don't, the law doesn't say, why did you commit murder? The law says you committed murder. And then we deal with it. And you know, but Philip needed to come in to ask that why, so that we can have a deeper understanding of human nature. And you have to remember that Philip did say at the point that he was a verification exercise. You know, because in actual fact, they had come to a conclusion and they were going to act on it. And Chika is like, okay, before we take this action, can we take a step backwards? You know? And I think that is really why, that's how they complement each other.
But it's good that you mentioned that he was an auditor, because that is the highest compliment you can give to auditors. To actually give them a story and a plot, because auditors are meaningless people in life.
No. I have to tell you this is a very interesting thing. The first time I ever spoke to an auditor, and we're looking at the financials, and it didn't make any sense to me. And then the auditor said to me, and I would never forget it, he said, don't look at the numbers, look at the story.
Oh wow, that's a very interesting auditor. I think you met the one interesting auditor in the entire
But there's a story behind the numbers. You know, whether it ends up being a loss, ends up being a loss or a profit or an even bottom line. There is always a story behind the numbers. You know, if you look at, for instance, the expense, the income and expense, if you get people to look at, you can see, oh no, these people, they are not very, very careful with how they use milk, for instance. You know, and the thing is, again, going back to what we're talking about, we are constantly looking at the what and the how. But if you get a really imaginative auditor, they can help you to understand the why you do what you do, that the figures look like this, so you can fix it to be in a better financial situation later. So I
and now we've also arrived at the conclusion why, if you're in an office right now and the quality of your tea or your milk has been reduced, it's because an auditor looked at the numbers and said, you're not using your money. This is why we hate auditors. anyway, moving along. There's a wonderful love triangle, if I can say this, in the book. But there's a question that I have. Both the female characters, Salome Briggs and Philip Tyler's wife, are very superstar megawatt personalities. Why were they're like twin sons in the book? Why are they so high-powered? I have a question. Did you already envision who would play these characters when you wrote them?
Oh no, not really. To be honest, not really. But I did at the beginning. I did have composite pictures of the characters, that I pasted on my screensaver, kind of thing. And my classmates then, when we started all our stories, we kept on exchanging text messages like, "Who do you see playing your lead character?" And we would send pictures to each other. And all
was I one of them? Because I need to.
But you do, yeah. But you make it. You have to go for the audition first. But really, I think I didn't have a picture. All I do know is that I write more. My approach to characters is very much aura based. I look at energy, the energy that I want to bring to the table, and I think it comes from my TV training background. We are advised as much as possible not to put too much specific in the description of a character, because in the audition, they bring their own interpretation. So you can't be so specific to say, "Oh no, she has blonde hair and she has blue eyes," except if the blue eyes is specific, is relevant to the story. So I try to work more with aura, and so I always saw the aura of those women. I think strong women have always, inspired me. I think my wife is also a very, very strong person, so I think she's a bit of a composite in there.
I have a follow-up question. Does that not add to the mythology of Nigerian women?
Yeah.
Big, megawatt personalities. Did you draw on that, or was just because this is your experience of them?
I think if any of the women in that story had been some kind of a doormat thing, I don't think anybody would have believed it. I don't think anybody would have believed it. I think it would have been as insincere and as inauthentic as they come. But that does not mean, obviously, that we still don't have the patriarchal culture and all that. But in their own, I do think that a lot of Nigerian women have their own agency to a large extent, and they do have a sense of matriarchy in their own community and their own family. I think in the larger system, I cannot talk about that. I'm not an expert in that space, but I come from very strong female characters, and I didn't think it was going to be possible for me to relate to anyone that is less than.
I think one of the wonderful things about Lightseekers is just the pace at which the story moves. There's no lag, there's no pause for intermission. And one of the reasons that I enjoyed reading was I've struggled recently to read because of a lot of professional commitments. So to make time to immerse oneself in what they call contemporary literature, all of these descriptions of the sun that go on for 5 pages. Yours is immediate. Hits the ground running. Within the very first 3 chapters, you have intense drama. So for me, my question is, when you are writing this book about this crime, why was it important for it to move at such a quick pace, considering that the crime had already happened?
I don't know. I think I'm very, very aware of what I call the TV culture, or you can call the Netflix culture, to be honest. And also my life.
So you saw the royalties coming in long ago. You're like, it's about to become.
No, but I mean in terms of the way we consume media now, and I feel that I to be honest, let me just put it like this. I wrote the kind of book that I would like to read. That I think that's the only explanation for it. I like fast-paced action. My literary heroes were the Sidney Sheldons of this world in those days. I love fast moving. I love the Robert Ludlums. I love the John Le Carre. And so for me, I kept on looking for a book like that from my culture, from my space, that told a really fantastic thriller, suspense kind of story. And so I can't say that it was deliberate to make it fast moving. I just know that I like fast moving story, But it's interesting. There's some people that actually said, "Oh, no, the book went on," and I'm like, I tried.
No. I think it's wonderfully written because the chapters, although they are succinct and they carry the story forward, don't get it twisted. There's some description in where you write down in your notebook and I am going to find a third-hand way of stealing this idea from Femi. But they're wonderful descriptions, but it doesn't slow down the pacing of the story. It really moves at a very quick pace. Like I said, I was reading this thing until 4 this morning to finish it, and at 3 o'clock I was feeling things and I'm trying to wait. did not wake up, but...
But I have to say, I had two amazing, brilliant editors on both sides of the Atlantic who are very well versed in thrillers and mystery and things like that. And so I learned a lot from them, I must say, because I do tend to go on a bit. I can go on. If you give me I can go on. You know, but as soon as you maybe establish the brand world that you want it to be fast paced, and one of the things that I did for myself was to make sure that each chapter was titled. So there's a theme.
That was a thing I envy you. I envy you. You got to get away with like titling every. In my next life with my next book, every chapter must be titled. That's the one thing I didn't get to do. Not that I didn't want to, but I came across, and yours is like chapter 4 is like poor unfortunate souls. I was like, why did I do this in mine?
No, I just felt it. For me, it was a survival technique.
Yeah.
It was almost the only way. You title the chapter, and it's an old trick I learned from a guy called what's his name?
Remy.
No, the guy that wrote Blink. Malcolm Gladwell.
Okay.
He always advises that even if it's not going to go into the print, title every chapter.
Provides you a roadmap.
It gives you the roadmap, and as soon as you've made your point, as soon as that title has been justified, move to the next chapter.
Okay.
Kind of thing. And I think I enjoyed doing it. But another thing that it did was that every time I have to find a title for that chapter, it controls me, And then I also told myself something that I wanted to do, which I couldn't, but I promised myself that no chapter would be more than 2,200 words.
Wow, you're brave.
Because I didn't want to have chapters.
I think I have sentences that are 4,000 words.
Oh, no, but I really didn't. I really wanted, because there's nothing that messes up my sleep more than being in the middle of a chapter and feeling sleepy.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to have chapters that are like 4 pages, 5 pages, and then just move on kind of thing.
And that really does contribute to like how quickly this story moves from place to place and from sequence to sequence. I have to ask, did you not write with aspiration, but you mentioned that you have a background in TV and screenwriting, and you are aware of the way people consume media. Did you see and envision the story coming to the screen at some point? Or in the future, do you want it to? When you wrote and you sat down, you said, I can see him running through, and it's raining and he's sweating and he's got the abs out. I'm still trying to get into this film.
You will, don't worry. No, I must say that, of course, it's every writer's, every novelist's dream that he gets some kind of a screen option or whatever, because it just adds to the income at the end of the day. But I think that I had done so much screen work in the past, and also being in advertising, that I really wanted to write something as far away from that in my head. So I never thought, I really did not think about it as what was it going to be, a movie or whatever. But what I do know I did was that I used my knowledge and my ability of being a screenwriter to create a very immediate, immersive experience. So I wanted people to read the book and feel like they watched a movie. Because now the screen rights have been, the options have gone, but I don't want to be in the shoes of the people who would adapt that, because there are some very, very difficult to realize things there, and these were done deliberately because this is the novel form, it's not the screen form, So I didn't.
That's important to know. Once again, the mystery question we're asking in order to win a signed book from Femi is, according to Femi Kayode, what is an investigative psychologist? Please remember to drop us your comments on the Facebook page or via Telegram to the following number, 081-201-3279. Okay. Femi, my next question is, how on earth your editors, as you mentioned correctly, how on earth they let you escape with Jean-Paul? Writing mine, when I was going through my editing process, I was given clear boundaries of what I was going to get away with and what was like a hard no. I know you have a background in advertising, so how did you even manage to solve this subplot, overplot? How did you manage to get them to buy into that idea?
I think it was the power of conviction, to be honest, because John Paul, for me, is the very definition of the system that created the crime.
Yeah.
And for you to, if you can take the time to understand John Paul and to understand how he became John Paul, then you are literally looking at colonial, the colonial experience, because he was abused as a child. He developed some fragmentation of the mind, but an amazingly intelligent, resourceful human. And so for me, it was important that we had a character that exemplified the system that I'm criticizing. The abuse and the self-hate and so many things that's happening in post-colonial Africa. And so for me, I think when I explained what I wanted to achieve with him, even if it wasn't on paper already, they were able to say, okay, if you can get away with it, And I remember that my editor actually sent me an email once and said, okay, we agree, but no John Paul chapter must be more than 800 words.
That's again, like you're very brave, because I think I have interludes that are 5 songs long. So your editors are like, they challenge you and they say 800, and thank God you have chapters that are not longer than 2. But it's a feat of writing that I, for example, cannot see myself doing.
But I think everybody has different ways of approaching. I mean, you write beautifully. Your words. Those sentences are but he does. But the sentences go, and I read it, and I'm like, damn, I wish I could. I actually feel that the reason why I write such short chapters and short sentences is because I'm vocabulary challenged. That's what I think. Because sometimes I'm
not
like,
so. Anyone who's
sometimes I'm reading and I'm like, what's that word? What's that word? What's that word? You don't need it. Walk away. But I also am very, very maybe particular about the fact that when I started reading the books that I loved, I was 9, 10, 11. And some of my favorite authors then, Judith Krantz, the lady that wrote Lace, Shelley Conran, Harold Robbins. Their language was so accessible. I had never been to the United States, but I could see. I have been on Santa Monica Boulevard so many times before I was 13. Simply because of their ability to break it down. It wasn't. So they were not. I think the worst thing anybody can say to me right now is that you are. I think I would like to be called a good writer, but I wouldn't want.
What you are?
I really wouldn't want somebody to say, "Oh, but your writing is very elevated," or "Your writing is very."
Even though it is.
I really don't think so. I really would like a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old to read
The Murder of the Okriki 3
and understand it, and really get it, because those were the things that exposed me to good books when I was really young. I really could not absorb some what you can call really literary writers at that age. I wish I could then, because maybe I would be a much more sublime writer kind of thing. But right now, I just want to tell stories that my teenage sons can read and understand at a different level, hopefully from a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old. But across board, I want it to be accessible enough in very simple language, whether it's English or French or German, that I can actually, that it communicates. I want to tell a story. I want to tell a good story much more than I want to be a good writer. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does.
Yeah.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah. And for those of you again who are joining us from home, I'm in studio, not in studio.
Well, it is a studio. I love the set. Thank you guys. I love the set.
Then with Femi Kayore, we're talking about his wonderful debut novel, Lightseekers. The next question I have, Femi, is you're talking about how your writers, they broke down places you'd never been to in such an accessible way. And this story takes part one, in a country I think a lot of people know from literature, Nigeria. Some people think of it
From
as
media.
yeah. Some people think about it as like one blanket space, but obviously there's a lot of nuance. And then when they talk about Nigeria, they often mean one place, Lagos. They just mean that. And from that, even with Lagos, the experience of it can sometimes be blanket. But you said it outside. You moved to PH, Port Harcourt, which I've never been to, never seen portrayed anywhere else. I know writers from there, but I don't know literature about that place. I never engaged with it before this, I can admit that to you. How did you go about the process of creating this world that might also be new to literature? Which it isn't, but to some way.
Well, you can say popular literature.
Yeah, you know how they might say, oh, they didn't die in Lagos. No, I don't want to.
Oh, well, I don't know. I think, again, the setting is important in a story, but I think people just want good stories. Whether this, what I really wanted to tell about with Lightseekers is to tell a story that anybody could relate to. And a lot of Americans, for instance, have written me mails to say, with what happened in January 6th, there's no way they read Lightseekers the same way again, because it's there. It can happen in Washington, and it can happen in Port Harcourt, and it can happen in Lagos, and it can happen in India, for all they care. But the reality of the matter is that I wanted to create a controlled environment, and this crime did happen. The initial crime did happen in Port Harcourt, at least in that area, in the southeast region. It wasn't quite Port Harcourt, but around there. And I felt it was important to. It gave me a bit more control, number one, and it allowed my imagination to fly around, because it is a fictitious town in Port Harcourt. So I think it gave people another aspect of this Nigeria that they keep seeing.
I had to Google. I was like, "Where's Okriki?"
There's no Okriki. It's a fictional town. Actually, I sort of modeled it after my own village, which is not in Port Harcourt. But when I did go to Port Harcourt and I did my research, I did put in some of the colors and the edges and all of those kind of things. But the reality of the matter is that if I had said that story in Lagos, the dynamics would have been extremely different, and the way that they would have gone about solving the crime would have been very, very different. Again, the impact of, I think that's something that we keep taking for granted, the impact of setting and systems on people's behavior, I still believe is extremely underrated in I would say, contemporary African literature. A lot of our writing is still very, very internalized, what the person is thinking, the tension that goes on, the push and pull and all of that. But there's so much drama around us. I mean, when you read about Lagos or Nigeria, for instance, everybody talks about the lack of electricity and all of those kind of things. But I'm like, yeah, I know, but there's drama in there.
I bet you're talking about South Africa for a moment.
Oh, really? Load shedding. Load shedding, not NEPA. But for us, I think what I want to also dramatize is that there is drama in that lack of electricity. Something is happening there. A baby was born in the darkness. Somebody died in the darkness. And so we cannot just suddenly just say, oh, there was no power, and just move on. Something happened in the no power, and the fact, and that thing can only happen because there's no power, and that for me is what fascinates me. And I think I was able to only do that by moving out of the Lagos dynamics and moving to something a bit off center, so to speak, to communicate.
I think what you said about place having a definite impact on people and the way that they act is true, because when I was writing my own story, my novel, later on it came out that I got a lot of flack for saying VinterQuest was like this and yada yada, and my sense of humor was not right here. And then I was like, of course, like VinterQuest people have a good sense of humor. Like, if it was, I could be from Pioneers Park. Those people are
you didn't say that.
It's just Jack Russell's in Pioneers Park. No, I'm joking. But what you say about place is important. It is true. And I guess then my follow-up question is for Lightseekers. When you are writing this story that is set in a fictional town or Okriki in Port Harcourt, the
Mm.
Port Harcourt area.
Mhm.
It's set in Nigeria, but you're writing it from Windhoek in Namibia.
Uh,
What things from here affected or seeped into, say, writing? Because I know you started at the UEA when
Yeah.
you were studying,
Uh-huh.
but when you were going through, did anything from this area seep in?
To be honest, nothing. To be honest, I think one of the reasons why I love.
Are you saying you didn't put Kapana starch in your
No, not yet.
Not
Not
yet.
yet.
Ah,
Yeah. But I must say, the one thing that Namibia, which was the reason why I moved here, to be honest, was the space it gives me to think, and that's the biggest privilege this country has ever given creative people like us, is the space to be and the space to imagine and to travel without moving, because it's not noisy, it's not, so I really enjoyed writing here. But there was a particular time when I got to a part in the story where I knew I had to. I had to go back to Nigeria, sit down there, smell it, and talk to people. So I did, and I did do that. But what I think the gift that Namibia gave me while writing this book was the space. It gave me the space, it gave me the almost like it honored me, in a sense, to do that. Because I don't think I would have been able to write this book, go to school, have a 9-to-5 full-time job, and still write. If I was, to be honest, in Lagos, I don't think I would have been able to get away with it.
Same here. I don't think I'd have been able to write what I write if I was not here at this point in time. Yeah. Do we have any questions from the audience to ask at this point? Anybody want to ask something? Or any comments from our Facebook?
Yeah, comments maybe. Comments and questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am a crime reader. I really love crime, so it's my genre. So I enjoyed it a lot. What for me was very interesting is how I think you mentioned also that people commented on the setting, Nigeria, you hear Nigeria and you hear drug lords, or you think drug lords. And I mean, it was not even, so it was very interesting. Your setting, your characters were really multifaceted, which I enjoyed, because if you talk about fast-moving plots of the olden days, normally those characters weren't that well developed. It was really a very linear, but looking back on it. So I really enjoyed this main protagonist and his family even, twin sons.
Yeah.
Do you have twins, or do you have twins? But still, I really enjoyed, and the dynamics between the husband and the wife, and the other woman moving on the, it was just, I really loved it.
Thank you so much.
So I wanted to say I enjoyed that. My actual question, I think I've kind of lost here. Oh yes, my actual question is actually more about you, because you studied psychology. You are working in advertising. I want to know, when you finished studying psychology, did you practice, or did you move away from there immediately? Or how did that go? Because I'm just fascinated by, you studied, I think you studied in Nigeria, is that right?
Yeah.
And then you moved at some point to England to study, and then to here.
Yeah, I did try to practice psychology. I did try. I did my internship at a psychiatric hospital, a really huge, very excellent psychiatric hospital in Nigeria. And that was when I knew that I couldn't. I just couldn't do it. When the studying of it, I absolutely enjoyed it. I excelled in my studies. I really was very, very excited, and I found out that I really love psychology, the study of the human mind, and why we do what we do. But when it came to the practice, I didn't have the patience for it. I really did not. And as of the way psychology was being practiced in Nigeria then, it was very much psychiatry based, meaning it was a lot. It wasn't as therapy based as much as very medical, very prescriptive in terms of medicine. So the psychiatrist was God, in a sense, and so that's fine. And then I also found out that I didn't have patience for people's
Yeah.
I really
No,
just
I
feel
really,
it.
I mean, I can imagine it. To be studying is fascinating.
Yeah.
But to listen to people's problems and then tell them this, obviously, so this is what you've got to do. So
Yes. And I also rebelled with one thing, and that's something that I'm very passionate about, is that I hated the putting people in boxes. The diagnosis that says you are schizophrenic, so, or you are depressed, or you are the putting people in boxes and in terms of diagnosis really bothered me, because it seemed as if everything was a problem. You know, one of the jokes that we used to have was always that if you talk too much, you have pressure of speech, and if you don't talk, you have mutism. Everything is, you know, kind of thing. So it's like, so I couldn't quite identify with that, putting people in these diagnostic classifications, which I also felt was not even culturally relevant enough. So in my culture, if you say to somebody, "Are you feeling blue today?" the person's like, "What are you talking about? You know, what does?" Okay. But if you say, "Do you feel like crying?" "Yes, I feel sad." But if I go to the US and I say, "Do you feel blue today?" the person says, "Oh no, yes, I do feel blue today."
Yeah.
You know, so I find that the study as of then had a lot of cultural nuances that was not being captured in the diagnosis, and I didn't think I was ready to take on the fight, or I was smart enough to create culturally relevant diagnostic tools.